Hello everyone, and welcome back to World of Warships Blitz with Terry. The British destroyer line is out, and it's about time that we're getting a closer look. So I've spent, well, a decent part of the weekend grinding a little bit and getting a feel for these ships, and just in general having a closer look. So how do they compare? What are the British destroyers and what's special about them? Well, on the surface, the first two things that you'll really notice is, and let's start down here at the Valkyrie at tier 3, because it's very unusual that a tier 3 ship actually gets any ship skills. Usually they start showing up at around tier 5. The Valkyrie gets fuel smokes. Now these are the same kind of short-lived smokes that you had, for example, on the Hill, or that you get on the Italian cruisers. They don't last very long, but you can take them with you. So you can keep going at full speed, and you can smoke up for about 10 seconds or so, which makes you not visible for a bit. These are not put a smoke up, hide in it, and then start shooting things, smokes. These are, oh crap, I'm in trouble, I need to get out of here quick, or I need to do a full broadside turn against a light cruiser or something, sort of smokes where you want to be invisible for a little bit. The other thing that is particular to the British destroyer line are the single-fire torpedoes. So instead of a wide and narrow spread, you get a wide and single spread, which allows you to, well, decide where every single torpedo goes. So you can make interesting patterns out of them. Or, as is probably a lot more common, you can all shoot them in a straight line, which is a little bit like putting everything on one number when you're betting. Because they are obviously then relatively easy to dodge. Because if you have a wider spread, you have a chance that at least some of them will hit, whereas if you all send them in a straight line, if anybody manages to dodge said straight line, all your torpedoes are going to go nowhere. But it also means that you can get all torpedoes on target. So these are the things that are kind of obvious at first glance about the Royal Navy destroyers. In terms of ship skills, at tier, I think it's at tier, yeah, it's at tier 7 with the Jervis when we start getting a sonar. Okay, so sonar usually points more towards destroyer hunter. That's not how I see these ships, at least not so far. But let's look forward further. So with the Lightning at tier 8, we then get the full set. So we get fuel smokes, we get sonar, and we get the air defense alert. To be honest, the air defense alert wouldn't have made any sense before that, because the air is absolutely dreadful on the ships before that. I'm not sure about the Jervis, but damn sure about the Icarus. Yeah, the Jervis doesn't have any either. So there is a bit of a change, and this becomes relevant later when we're looking at captain builds. But then what else is kind of, or how else do these destroyers compare to the other lines? Now let's actually take a closer look at the Icarus at tier 6. So let's put a filter up for all tier 6 destroyers that I happen to have laying around. Now the Icarus, 13,000 hit points and a 3% damage reduction. So the damage reduction gives you a little bit of an indicator as to how well these ships can withstand punishment. The British ones are very squishy. So, for example, the Farragut gets 4.5 and gets a little bit more hit points. And also the 13,000 is only because of the camo. If I take the camo out, actually let's do that just for comparison values. We get down to 12,800. So, lowest hit points in tier 6 compared to something like the German destroyers. Or I don't have them around here, but if we look at the Japanese ones, if we look at the Fubuki, Fubuki might be slightly lower in hit points, but still has a slightly better armor. So you're effectively having a Japanese destroyer squishy level, you could say. The other thing that becomes relatively obvious, and we should actually be looking at the Icarus in order to find that out, not at the Ansiaorchestra here, is that they are extremely maneuverable. So if you take a closer look, they are not fast. These are relatively slow destroyers, at least around here. We can have a look later at the tech tree, see if they get any quicker. But boy, are they maneuverable. So she's got a turn time of 2.5 seconds, and it takes only 5 seconds to get full up to speed. If you compare that, for example, to a Farragut, which is a very maneuverable destroyer, she has nothing on that. So this thing outturns and out accelerates pretty much anything. In return, can't really take a punishment. The guns are the British 120mm destroyer guns. And this is true, I think, up to tier 8, and then we switch a tier, we switch a caliber lower. So these are on the low end of destroyer calibers. So for example, the Americans have the 127mm, and you can see that in the damage numbers, they're slightly higher. The Germans at this point have the 150s, but then switch over to the 170, to the 127s, I think. The Soviets, and in this case Pan-Asian here as well, get the 130s, which are considerably better guns than what you get on the Icarus. She doesn't have the greatest guns, and she only has 4 of them. So, for example, again, the Farragut has 5 guns, whereas the Icarus only gets 4. And they are relatively slow on the turret traverse as well, for something this maneuverable. These are, at least in my opinion, not gunboats. You will struggle to win a gunfight in a British destroyer with pretty much anything else. And given that the Gajah-Mada, the Pan-Asian tier 7, is actually a British destroyer, I can kind of account to that because I felt slightly disappointed coming from the Fushun at tier 6. I haven't played the Jervis yet, but the Icarus definitely doesn't feel like a gunboat to me because relatively low armor, slightly lower caliber on the guns, and 6-second reload, the Farragut's 5, it all adds up. Or the Fushun's 5 with the Fushun's 430s. So what is it about the torpedoes then? Well, first of all, we're getting a lot of them. 10 torpedoes is not terrible, and a 1-minute reload compared to, say, the Farragut's gets 8 with a 50-second reload. But we do get a better range. Speed-wise, they are on the slow side, but they are not as dreadfully slow as the American ones. So pretty much average, I would say, in terms of torpedo power. Again, the special part here being the single fire capability that you can. So you can, even at longer ranges, if you know how to aim them properly and how to anticipate target movements, and that's what it's going to be all about with these, even at longer ranges, you can get all torpedoes on target, which is not something you can easily do with other destroyers. And again, to me, this speaks range a little bit more. So she's definitely capable of stealth torping with 7.2 kilometer range. Also, you can fire probably through some interesting gaps on occasion where you can't get the narrow spreads through on others, or you can do things like drop a lot of torpedoes at a corner, very particularly where a ship is poking out, where just the nose is visible, stuff like that. The AA on the Icarus is pretty much non-existent. That I think is historically correct. I think she had 2 machine guns, and that was it. Nothing in terms of actual AA. The surface detection out of the box is not great. And then we'll get to the build of the Icarus in a minute. Let's have a quick look further up. So in tier 7 with the Jervis, I've kind of skipped over because we've already talked about the Acasta. I've played the Wakeful for a little bit, but you're gonna get through these tiers relatively quickly. So the Jervis at tier 7, which I haven't played yet, but similar theme, maneuverable. We do get 6 guns now, which is a bit better than what we had previously. And we're basically getting the same torpedoes and everything else. The Lightning at tier 8 still has the 120mm guns, still has 6 of them, slightly faster reload, and actually switches down to 8 torpedoes, but with a faster reload. And the range is getting progressively longer. The Jutland, and okay, it's a British destroyer, so should I call it the Jutland? I don't know. Jutland is, well, kind of what the place was called. So anyway, we'll see what we're sticking with. Again, pretty maneuverable, not the fastest on them. And here we switch the guns down to 113mm, so low caliber. But in return, we get a little bit faster reload again. This is kind of starting to feel like Japanese gunboat territory, Kitakaze sort of thing. but I haven't played either of these ships, so I can't really draw any comparisons. The torpedo tubes are back to quintuple launchers, but we got a 9-kilometer range on these by now. Although, if you want a single fire at 9 kilometer, I'm not quite sure how much you're gonna actually hit. The AA finally starts picking up a little bit. And in tier 10, we've got the Daring, which as well, these are actually also a little bit sturdier, which as well is a pretty maneuverable destroyer, which as well gets the 113mm guns with a 2.5 second reload. That sounds fun. And it gets kind of the same setup with the torpedoes. So the top tier ones are a bit different from the rest of them. I will have to play Jervis and Lightning to actually make any statements around it, but let's get back to the Icarus. So what have we actually done with the Icarus? I have played around with a couple of different setups. Now, the first point, this is a problem you had in the Wakeful, is that one of the torpedo launches wasn't having a 360-degree rotation. So if you happen to have it pointing the wrong way, and you suddenly turn it around, and they don't have great torpedo angles. These things, they are quite broadside-ish. Then the launcher had to go the long way around, and suddenly you only had half your torpedoes ready. Not so much a problem you get in the Icarus. So instead of using the torpedo mod, I actually went with the main battery mod, because the guns turn on the slow side, and these things are so maneuverable that if you do get into a gunfight, you're actually out-turning your guns very, very quickly. The second slot, just because I don't really have anything else useful to put here, I've put in propulsion. I don't think you're going to need the steering gear mod, because the turn time is so tiny that there's really no need for that. And the third slot is where it gets interesting. So I have played both the propulsion mod 2 for higher speed and the concealment system, which gives you a pretty decent concealment. Now, they both have their advantages and disadvantages. Again, these things are slow, right? They don't outrun anything easily. With the propulsion mod and all the necessary things, you get them to, I think, up to like 37-ish, 37.5 knots, which is decent, which is a decent speed. But given that I feel this is not a gunboat destroyer, I decided eventually to stick with the concealment just so I can outspot things and I can go undetected if I need to. So I try to play this thing at range mostly, and only do the occasional aggression rush and these sort of things. But I tend to try and not gunfight enemy destroyers too much in this, if I can avoid it, because again, she is rather squishy. Supplies is no surprise, it's the standard set. Now, the commander that you want on these lines, and remember, if you're building that for the line, you end up with the Daring at tier 10. I did get the battlefield support, because the higher tier destroyers get both sonar and defensive AA, and even though the AA isn't grand, it's still something that's there, and it feels like if you are getting singled out by a carrier, having the capability to maybe shoot a torpedo plane down before it drops you might be a useful thing, especially in higher tiers. Just speculation, I haven't tried this yet. Preheating obviously in the next one, and I've also chosen to get a defense expert. Now, I understand this doesn't make any sense until tier 8, I think. And you do sorely miss the victorious charge, so I definitely wouldn't blame you if you were going on that. That would be an absolutely valid choice. You could probably take survivalists on these things rather than Daredevil, because they are so maneuverable already that it's kind of not necessarily making sense. Survivalist might make sense. Recon and Surveillance might definitely make sense. And fully prepared, again, would be a thing. The Mistweaver is an interesting question here, because these are short duration smokes. So if you get 15% smoke duration, it's not going to give you much. It's going to give you an additional second or so on the smoke, which is nice to have. The much more interesting point for me is the 33% cooldown reduction. Because again, if we have a very quick look at these ships, like in the higher tiers, the Lightning still gets 4, the Jutland gets 5, or the Jutland, and the daring gets 5 as well. So these ships get a reasonably large amount of smoke screens. So we do want them, because they are so short duration, we do want them available again as quickly as we can. And for me, that's kind of the main point of having the Mistweaver skill, to reduce the cooldown on these things. We don't get engine accelerators, so it's probably demo expert here, although it doesn't make it's probably not going to do much of a difference. And then, I don't know, you might want to get with, I will have to try this, if the IFHE means that you can actually get, I'm not sure, with the 120s, if you can get full pens against superstructure, or with the 113s especially, because on the higher tiers, that's what you're going to have. And if it does make any difference, otherwise you may well go with the APCS to give your low caliber guns a bit better chance to penetrate enemy destroyers at this tier. I don't know. I'll have to try that out. And obviously Giant Hunter is the skill of choice that you're eventually going for. But yeah, think ahead with your captain skills, and do think if you want to have the additional sonar and a defense at the cost of having a slightly later torpedo warning. Again, for me, given that I have Hydro, plus I have a very, very maneuverable ship, and a ship that has an amazing engine in terms of stopping, you don't really need that one. Again, the A defense expert is questionable. You can as well go with Victorious Charge. All right, so a lot of talking. But yeah, I've played the Icarus quite a bit. Is she an extremely strong tier 6 destroyer? It depends. She's definitely different, and you're going to have to use her slightly differently than the other destroyers. I would, after playing the ship for a day or so, I would try to stick to range and try to do things like set fires and try to avoid gunfights with other destroyers. And use the torpedoes mostly on single fire in order to, well, dunk battleships and things that aren't capable of dodging, and try to surprise people with this. You can do the occasional rush. So again, these short duration smoke screens are actually quite useful if you need to rush something, because while you're vulnerable and giving broadside, you can make yourself invisible for 10 seconds while you're passing by something and just dunk a load of torpedoes into them. So you can do this, but I would generally try not to, unless the situation warrants it. So I'm playing them more like you would play maybe a Japanese gunboat destroyer, rather than an American or a Soviet destroyer, which I would play much more aggressively, or a German destroyer as well. All right, anyway, let's get into a battle. So here we are on Bay of Storms. I like that map. That's one of my favorite maps. And we are playing top tier by the looks of it, although there's only one tier 5 in the enemy team, and I think we've got 2, yeah. So it's carry and play, which is generally a problem because you get spotted. Well, but we have a refreshing lack of cruisers to deal with. We've got 2 Arizonas. One of them is a dangerous player by the looks of it. Dunkirk, Dallas, Eigel, and Nicholas. All right, let's do this. Now, Bay of Storms. What am I gonna do? Where am I gonna head? With 2 destroyers on the enemy team, there's a decent chance that one of them lurks around the corner. Let's see if I have cruiser support, but I generally will try. I would try with this setup to go wide, because I do have the good stealth, so I'm suspecting that I should be able to probably outspot most of the enemy DDs. Anyway, I'm switching over to the armor piercing just in case I'm going to be running into anything. And it is important to line up both the torpedoes and the guns to the side that you actually want to fire from at the beginning, because the turrets do take a while to get around. And not so much on the Icarus, but on the Wakeful, I had huge problems with the 360 torpedoes being on the wrong end. And we'll see if we spot anything. Okay, the carrier scout's on the other side, so I got lucky here. No carrier scout. Only sends dive bombers out as well, which means the carrier probably doesn't have a huge amount of idea what he's doing, because usually you would expect the fighters to be up at this point, but the same with our carrier. So, okay, there come the fighters. there should be a destroyer here somewhere, but I haven't seen them. And I have the tip with just of the island just within my spotting range. So I think we might be in the clear here. Okay, there's a Dallas. Now here comes the. Let me pause this for a second. I don't usually do this in the in the regular battles, but just to quickly talk about what I'm thinking here. Now you have two choices in a situation like this, with something like the Icarus. You could try to. In most scenarios, you would maybe drop some stealth torps or try to jockey into a better position and try not to get spotted by the Dallas, especially at close range. This is one of the scenarios where you can use the fuel smokes, especially since it's mid-tier and you would assume that that your opponent maybe doesn't quite know that well yet how to react to such a thing. So this is a scenario where you can actually rush because the Dallas doesn't have any support. Yes, there is a battleship behind them, but I don't see any enemy destroyers. There's no other cruisers. So at this point, I'm thinking, okay, screw this. We're going to risk it. We're going to rush the Dallas. So you want to go head in. I'm switching over to the high explosive because as soon as I'm spotted, I might as well start shooting at him. Maybe I'll get a fire. And the Dallas reacts, well, he doesn't really react. So at this point, I'm going to pop my fuel smoke, because I'm passing his broadside and just dunking some torpedoes into him. See if he's reacting. No, he's not. Okay. So the first set completely hits him, and the second set, I'm not quite sure what happened there. Only one torpedo. He might have dodged that one, but he's dead. He got shot at by the London and everything. So that one's dead now. Which leaves the Arizona, and the Arizona is very much looking at me. I would have thought the Arizona is shooting at the London. But it looks like the London is actually not as behind me as I thought he was going to be. So let's try to set the Arizona on fire. There we go. Arizona is on fire. This is the range that I'm comfortable with just with gunnery. Because at this range, I am somewhat confident to dodge battleship shells. There comes some Arizona shots. He overshot. Remember, this was a skilled player. So we do have to be a little bit careful. He definitely knows what he's doing. But it looks like we've more or less rolled up this flank. So depending on what I don't know where the other destroyer is. We only got one destroyer spotted so far, but my torpedoes are reloaded. So I'm going to go after that Arizona and see what we can do. So they've lost it. Okay, they've lost the Eagle as well, which means that they are now 2 ships down. Okay, we've lost our Farragut. So it's even again. But they're concentrated extremely hard on the other side of the map, so London and me can push in here. Now, it'd be nice if London was actually shooting at the Arizona and setting him on fire, but I'm going to drop the torpedoes pretty much straight along the guideline because I am expecting Arizona to broadside fire at London, and not necessarily to go into a turn. Now he does go into a turn here. And I don't know if he's seen my torpedoes at this point and is trying to dodge. So I got lucky here that these are hitting. That was at the tip of the nose, and it would have probably, given that it's a skilled player, it would have probably been better to drop a little bit further on the side. So I got some hits in again, but he's still firing armor piercing at me. Now Arizona has, I don't know what kind of guns Arizona has, but I would still fire high explosive, so I'm using the smoke just to put him off guard and dodge the next salvo here. All the while whittling away with my guns. I'm kind of hoping for a fire from the London. The London has an extremely good high explosive shells, but unfortunately he's firing armor piercing at the Arizona. So dodge the next. He shoots off my rudder. That happens. Repair it quickly, and now we're just going to rush them because he's on so low health. Then I've got 8,000 hit points. There's no way he's going to sink me in time. So I can either gun him down with the help of London, or I can just use some torpedoes. I don't necessarily want to use my torpedoes because we're still even on ships and we're behind on points. So I might have to make something happen here. And there's the Independence. So we're going to take one more armor piercing salvo from him. But from here on, we should be able to just gun him down. I could have used the AP shells here against the stern, but yeah, just a quick carrier, torp dodge, and he's done for. Okay, Independence. you are next. Now, I haven't dropped torpedoes here because the Independence is sailing away from me, and he would probably be sailing outside torpedo range. Just getting him, just dodging his dive bombers, getting a fire set. Now he's in the turn because he can't go any further because there's an island in the way. So this is the time I can drop my torpedoes. Now I'm not dropping them all in the same spot. I'm just in case he's doing a sharp turn. I'm dropping 2 there and scattering the rest around in a little like search pattern sort of. He's got torpedo bombers out again, so I'm using a heal just in case I can't dodge those torp bombers. Use the fuel smoke. You don't have to go forward in your fuel smoke. You can also go backwards in your fuel smoke, just to dodge the torp bomber drop. And the first, he didn't turn in, so the first 2 torps missed. But I can absolutely grab him with the rest of the spread. And there's the big game hunter. We're at 80,000 damage done so far. There's a Nicholas. So now it's time to use the armor piercing. Now London fires a single spread at the Nicholas. That's very unlikely to hit him, because the Nicholas is probably not going to stay where he's sailing right now, but well, you never know. He might sail right into them. It happened. Stranger things have happened in mid-tiers. Come on, come on, come on. Oh, damn it. There goes the American destroyer maneuverability. All right, so I'm just going to start opening up at him here. And I'm going to drop a wide spread of torpedoes, 2, and just a second one next to it. So I don't need all torpedoes on target to kill that Nicholas, especially not with the London around. So I should be good to just, you know, drop them in a scatter pattern and see if anything there hits. And that should... Okay, that went right through him for some reason, but the next one should... does it? Yeah, there we go. Okay. That torpedo hits him. We get a very unusual medal that I haven't seen before, but that was the last ship alive, I think, at this point. We did get something strange there that I hadn't seen before. It must be one of the newer medals. But yeah, this is kind of how I generally play the Icarus. Let's see what that was. It wasn't that one. That's the big game hunter, isn't it? The one on the right. No, the second one from the right. What is that? I haven't seen that before yet. That's the big game hunter. No mercy. 1 CV, 1 BB, 1 cruiser, and 1 destroyer. Okay, okay. Yeah, I've done that. Yeah, that's kind of how I like playing the Icarus. Stay at range, use your torpedoes for the larger targets, and do the rushes if you need to. But I do try to stay out of gunfights with enemy destroyers mostly if I can. And still done a reasonable amount of damage with my main guns. So you definitely can use them. Is this an extremely powerful tier 6 destroyer? I don't know. My bet would still be on the Fusion. You can pull games like this, especially in mid-tier when people don't know how to react to a destroyer rushing you. But you don't have the speed. So if that Dallas had seen me at the point where he'd seen me rushing, he would have reacted and gone into a hard turn and kiting away from me. He could have killed me easily. The only reason I was successful with that is because he wasn't paying any attention to me. So, and once he realized I was there, it was too late, because at that point he had already eaten a broadside of torpedoes. Don't expect to be able to pull that off in tier 8 games with regular success. But yeah, they're fun ships to play so far. And yeah, I do enjoy them. And we'll see how it's not my priority grinding line, but we'll see how I'm getting on with it, and we'll have some more games with higher tiers at some point. Anyway, that's it for today. Thanks everybody, and I'll see you next time. Bye.